Okay, V'siyata D'Shmai, let's begin now the third Vaad. This we're holding now by a very important emotion by the name of Tiferes. And those of you that have been busy in the last few weeks discussing Amar Chesed, Amar Gvura, I do suggest waiting until you get to Tiferes, because Tiferes is a very important emotion that really gives us a tremendous amount of clarity into much of Chesed and Gvura that we've been discussing in the last few weeks. I also wish that you wait until the next couple of Vadim as well, where we discuss also Netzach and Hoid, which also has to be discussed, and we have to understand the difference between them all. So before we make any judgments, who you are, where you come from, and where your direction is, try to wait till we finish everything until you have a much bigger picture, and we'll hopefully understand that. So today we're going to do a very difficult task, and that is to try to describe what is Tiferes. It's a very, very not an easy task to do. We're going to try B'siyata D'Shmai to do it. You may find that we repeat ourselves a few times, but it's for the sake of clarity. So I want to make sure that you really have this clear, because without this, it's really a big shame. So Tiferes is a very important aspect to enable us to integrate our emotions, and we do that through the third and middle sort of column, or should we say the third item in that triangle, which maybe we'll speak about more next week, and that is going to be Tiferes, which is generally described or translated as beauty. That is a very easy and simple translation of Tiferes. And in a physical way, and how the Rabban Shalom created our bodies, if the right arm is Chesed and the left arm is Gvura, then the body represents Tiferes. Now, Tiferes is basically the ability to reach the true essence of who you actually are. Like, for example, an orchestra that has the ability to take many different types of instruments and, play them together in harmony, and it even makes a more beautiful sound than if they were individually. So the Zohar, for example, uses that as an example, and he also uses the example of colors. And the Zohar says that if you have colors that are separate by themselves, they're very beautiful shades, beautiful colors, very vibrant colors, and they're sometimes very beautiful alone by themselves. However, they can be even more beautiful when you combine them with others and you integrate other colors together with them. Then the colors can become even more beautiful and more harmony. So Tiferes is the beauty and the harmony because it takes the Chesed and the Gvura and it makes them complement each other. So that's a very simple explanation. But Tiferes is not just what people think it as, a combination of Chesed and Gvura. So what is it? How would we describe Tiferes on its own? In other words, apart from allowing the right and the left to work together, right, in combination, what is the tool? What is the energy? What is the emotion of Tiferes? And more importantly, how do I access it to allow me to incorporate Chesed and Gvura into our lives? That is the question. So we're going to explain like this. Maybe we'll use this explanation more down the line when we discuss some of the other ones down the line. But let's describe Tiferes in the following way. Imagine if you have a king who appoints various ministers, and these ministers are there to help him run the country. So let's take two, for example. He's got the finance minister. The finance minister's job is to make sure that the country doesn't spend too much money, right? That the country isn't overspending in what it is, make sure the finances are good and everything is where it's meant to be. But you also have a welfare minister. A welfare minister is there to ensure that the country is spending money on what it needs to spend money, whether it's the roads, whether it's tourism, whatever it may be. That is what the welfare minister is making sure. Now, each of them have their jobs, they have their responsibilities, and they take their jobs very, very seriously. And eventually, when you take a job seriously, you develop a very close relationship and connection to the job that you have. Now, what happens if one day they have a fight? Right? This one holds he's spending too much money, and that one holds he's spending too little money, and they're fighting backwards and forwards. What are we meant to do to resolve this conflict? So what we do is, we take both of these ministers, and we put them in front of the king. And the king describes and explains to them, guys, just remember something. You guys are doing a very important job and I need every single one of you. But each and every one of you are just a small part in running the country. There's a much bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is running the country. And we have to make sure that everything is done correctly. And you're there just to help me, the king, as he says to them, run the country. So yes, I understand each of you have your jobs and you take the job very seriously, but sometimes you have to take a step back and look at the greater goal and the greater picture, and that is the running of the country. And therefore you have to know that fighting is not going to make a difference and it's not going to help anything. You have to be able to put them back to their original status to understand what their job is and what they're meant to be doing. Now, Chesed and Gvura are like the ministers, and the soul is the king. So it's like planting a tree, for example. You take one seed and you plant the tree, and out of that tree you get, a huge trunk, and you get branches, and you get leaves, and you get fruit, and you get all sorts of different things. But it all just came from one seed. So basically, in the source of everything, they don't have a separate identity. They all have one identity, but it's all part of the bigger picture. Okay, so that is a simple explanation. We'll try to get more details as well. And here's the question we have to ask ourselves. Why is it that we get trapped within our own personalities? Why do we, for example, get trapped that we're so busy with chesed? We're so busy with chesed. The soul has, as we mentioned in the beginning, so many different types of garments. Chesed isn't essentially me. It's just the expression of that essence. Now, the problem is that we often become so focused on the process, meaning on the expressions that we have, that we forget the goal. In other words, we become so focused on how we express ourselves, but we forget that it's meant to be used to perfect the soul. So we're like the finance minister that's basically so focused on saving money for the country, he's going to end up doing things that are bad for the country, that are detrimental to the country, because he doesn't realize the goal, because he's so busy with his specific job. Now, every single one of us has a garment through which we express ourselves, maybe more than the other ones, but we get so caught up with that garment that we forget the goal. We forget that the garment is the process to get there, but not the goal, and we miss the goal. That's the problem. And therefore, we define ourselves often. That's why I asked you to wait before you define yourselves till the end. But we define ourselves, okay, I'm chesed. So I'm chesed, so I'm the right. So there's nothing I can do about it. I can't change myself. And the point comes, so much so, that we think that's the goal, that it becomes destructive, that we end up saying, I'm so chesed that I can't even say no to someone or something that's bad for him or for me. Because I'm so chesed, what do you want from me? Because we're so focused with the garment, with the expression, but we miss the goal. And therefore we sometimes have to go back to the source, to go back to the king to remind us, hold on a minute, I understand that's your job, Minister of Finance, but you have to know there's a country to run over here and there's a lot more parts of the picture. Take a look at the greater picture. And therefore, Tiferes is the ability to be able to step back, to remove the ego, which many of us have from the process, and to remind us what is the right goal. So if Chesed and Gvura are the arms, the right and the left, so as we said, Tiferes is the body, because that's the ability as the body does, to take the right arm and take the left arm and connect them together, bring them back to their source and allow it to be able to serve the greater goal and the most important, the picture. Now, Tiferes reminds us, and it reminds each side who they are serving, so we don't get caught up in the process, and it reminds us what the goal is, and that allows us to look at a much bigger picture. And I'll give you an example. By the way, most people, you should know, do not possess a natural Tiferes. Tiferes is not something that comes naturally. It's something that takes a lot of work, takes a lot of patience, and we're going to give you one exercise, hopefully, to work on, so you'll be able to try and do this. But if you have Tiferes, I cannot tell you how it will change so many things in your life, especially in relationships. I'll give you one example. I'll give you a few examples, but I'll just give you one right now. Imagine a teacher. This is where you really see it. You really see it at a teacher. A teacher, a rebbe, whatever it is, right, comes into a classroom. Now, teachers, and specifically many leaders, possess or should have worked on, hopefully did work on, their midah of Tiferes, right? Because for the reason that we'll get to in a moment, not all teachers have it and not all people have it. And then Hanami, some of them who don't have it should absolutely work on it because they need to have this. But it's not natural. It needs to be worked on. But I'll give you an example. A teacher walks into a room. Now, this teacher has an atiyah. This teaches either the right or the left. It's either chesed or gvura, for example, right? There's obviously more we'll get to next week, but just to make it simple based on what we've learned until now. A teacher is either chesed or gvura. Now, walks into a classroom, there's 25 kids over there who some of them are chesed and some of them are gvura, right? So can you imagine what's going on? That each of the 25 kids have their own netiyah. Naturally, the teacher's going to get on and gel with those that are similar and not get on and conflict with those that are not similar. That's just how it works. We generally gel and connect with the people that are similar to us, and we generally clash often with those that are not similar to us. So a good teacher will, for example, has to constantly make decisions to react or not to react, not according to them. In other words, the teacher's netiyah. In other words, not according to the teacher who's either chesed or gevura, that he should not react according to that, but rather, don't look at the garment, look at the goal. What's the goal when you walk into a classroom? The goal when you walk into a classroom is to teach the children. So when you step back for a moment, you take a step back and say, hold on a minute, yes, I'm chesed, I'm gevura, that's very nice, that works for me, but that's not what I'm doing right now. The goal is to teach the children. So the goal is to teach the children, very nice, for me it works chesed, or for me it works gevura, but for that particular child it doesn't, but for the other one maybe it does. And therefore, if you're not going to do that, the teacher's not going to do that, they're not fulfilling the goal, and you need Tiferes to be able to make that shift. You have to have Tiferes to be able to go from one to the other according to the goal that needs to be met. Because if a teacher would take a step back and say, what's my job? What am I doing? Yes, the finance minister has to make sure that the country is not spending so much money. But sometimes the finance minister has to go back to the king to hear that, whoa, there's a country to run and maybe I should spend more money because that's what needs to be done for the ultimate goal. And therefore, the teacher has to do the same thing, just giving you one example, it's to be able to shift between chesed and gevura according to the goal that they're trying to accomplish. So that is exactly what's going on. Now just imagine another example. Take a marriage, take children. This is so important when it comes to marriage and children, right? We are one way. Our wives might be a different way. We are one way. Our children might be and are going to be a different way. That's the metzias. So we can often react and act according to how we are because we're chesed, we're gvura, or whatever it may be. So of course we're going to act according to who we are because we're reacting. Of course we're going to act the way our neshama, our emotions direct us to. But Tiferes, if we work on it, allows us to step back and say, hold on a minute, what's the goal? Is that person chesed? Is that person gevura? Maybe there's a different goal, and therefore there has to be a different approach, and there has to be a different reaction in that case. And it's not about how I would deal with it based on my personality and my emotions, the way the Rebbeinu Shalom made me, but rather what the goal requires, and that is what the people I'm dealing with and the people I'm connected to and the relationships that I have, they require. And that's why Tiferes is incredible, but without Tiferes, the results can be incredibly bad, can be detrimental to relationships, to situations in life in a crazy, crazy way. Now, Tiferes basically tells you, stop for a moment. Yes, you're using your garment, you're either chesed or gevura, but that's you. Step back for a moment, look at the goal, look at the greater picture, the bigger picture, and shift often to the other side to allow that goal to be met. Now, be very careful. This doesn't mean don't be who you are. This doesn't mean go away from your personality. Absolutely not. You should be who you are. And that's not what Tiferes is taking you away from. What Tiferes is doing, it doesn't take you out of who you are. It just shifts the situation or shifts you into the situation according to the necessity. Now, somebody with absolutely no Tiferes is a person that basically says or does something with no regard that it helps anybody else. There are some people that know how to say things, and they know that it's going to get everyone crazy. They're going to drive everyone nuts, but they can't help it. Because they're so caught up in their own personal garment, it's their netiyah, they can't lean over for a moment to incorporate the other side which is what the situation is calling for in this situation. Now, that's why kids, by the way, you will not find this Tiferes much in kids. With young kids, you're not going to find Tiferes, and the simple reason is because kids, it's very important for kids to develop themselves first. They need to develop their garments, their emotions, their either chesed or gvura, before they can even think about integrating and mixing them over and shifting over, and before they work on the middle column, which is Tiferes, which takes a lot of maturity and a lot of realization of what the goal that we're setting out to do. A symptom, by the way, of Tiferes is someone that's very aware, someone that's very insightful. That is a symptom of someone that's got a lot of Tiferes. He's very aware of the situation and his surroundings. That means he obviously has worked on and has a tremendous amount of Tiferes. Now, important to note, this that we mentioned in the beginning, if you remember, that just like Chesed and Gvura have a positive and a negative, so too Tiferes also has a positive side and a negative side. So some people, for example, are great at sizing up the situation. They figure out exactly what the situation is. That's Tiferes. But they do it in order to manipulate the situation to be and to get the result that they're looking for. Now, manipulative people do what the situation requires, but only to get what they want. Not because the situation requires it. It's because they're trying to manipulate the situation to get the goal that they're looking for. So yes, they have Tiferes, but the Maraisa their Tiferes is being used in a very negative way. Tiferes is extremely powerful. It's brought down that it's even more powerful.
Using the Tiferes for their chesed?
No, they're using it for the negative. Just like you use the chesed for the negative, you can use the gvura for negative, you can use Tiferes for the negative. Everyone has a negative and a positive.
Right, but the negative of the Tiferes is the chesed.
No, it's not. It's using it for their own personal thing when it's going to be bad for other people. Otherwise, I'm looking at the situation. I recognize
unhealthy chesed is
no, it's not unhealthy chesed. Unhealthy Tiferes. Tiferes means I'm aware of someone else. Chesed is about me.
So if you're aware of it, even if you're aware of it, then it becomes Tiferes automatically.
It doesn't shift over, but my Tiferes means the awareness of not just me but others. And therefore, real healthy Tiferes means that I'm going to say, I want to do this because that's how I'm wired, but the situation requires otherwise, I'm going to do what the situation requires because there's a greater goal. Taking that and saying, I'm going to do it to get what I want is back to the unhealthy part of it's all about me. And it's Tiferes because you're using it, of course, you're using it together with Chesed, of course, because every midah incorporates every other one, of course. But the point is that I'm using the Tiferes part, which is the realization of what's going on. That's not Chesed, and therefore I'm using that in a bad way. It is brought down, by the way, that Tiferes is much more powerful than Chesed and Gvura, because it brings you back to your essence, it brings you back to the source. But again, people that use Tiferes in a negative way are very, very evil people, and they can cause destructive results in a terrible way. So the question is, okay, how do we develop our Tiferes? Lemaisa, it's a great thing to hear it. How do we develop our Tiferes? So a very simple exercise to try to develop your Tiferes part of you would be that whenever you need to respond to a situation, give yourselves 5 to 10 seconds and say to yourself in those 5 to 10 seconds the following: what do I want and what does the situation require? What do I want and what does the situation require? In those few seconds, if you've made that choice and you've been aware of what's going on, that it's not only necessarily about what I want, but also about what the situation may require, then you've trained yourself to think about the goal and not only the process. Now, it's difficult. It's not easy because, again, we're wired right or left, right? Which, again, this one is talking about Chesed and Gvura. And next time we're talking about Netzach and Hoig. But Al Kaponim, over here at least, it's clear that it's going to be difficult because we're going to have to shift away from who we are and how we are wired. And that, by the way, can be quite difficult. I want to end with one beautiful idea. We're learning kashrus, we're learning the Inyan of kashrus, and I want to end with the Inyan of kashrus in the following way. Every halacha, as we know, has not only a simple, physical, surface meaning to it, but also has a spiritual meaning to every halacha that we know. And kashrus, for example, kosher animals specifically, the Torah gives us two simonim for a kosher animal. Number one, it has to chew the cud, and number two, it has to have split hooves. Now, it's true, many hold that it's a hoik, we don't understand it, we don't get it, it's a reasoning that's beyond us, but the Rambam writes very clearly that every single mitzvah has a very hidden significance, and if we could try to gain anything from that, we should. Here's the following. Al pi Kabbalah, emotions are very animalistic. That means they come from animals in the way that, for example, the passion, the excitement. Animals are also very, emotional beings in that way. Now, in order to channel those emotions that we have to do two things. Number one, we have to channel the energy through a tremendous amount of hard work of refinement. You have to refine that. And that's represented by the animal chewing its cud. It doesn't just quickly swallow it, but again and again and again. That is how we are supposed to channel the energy to refine it before you swallow it. And number two, the split hooves. Now, completely split they're meant to be, so that you have right and you have left. In order to ensure that your emotions are channeled correctly, a person needs integration. You need to incorporate both the left and both the right. The animal has to have both the left hoof and the right hoof, and therefore in a Hanami, maybe we're more one than the other, but Tiferes is able to blend them together and incorporate both together, and then you have a kosher animal, and then you have healthy emotions. But as Hashem, next time we'll go down the pyramid, we'll go down the circles to the next triangle, and we'll talk about Netzach and Hod in an incredible way. Join us then.